Are we starting?
Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, welcome to the 5th International Conference on Learning Cities. We are going to start our session shortly, so please be seated and enter the conference hall, please. Those who are participating online, please be ready for the forum. We are gonna begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, welcome to the 5th International Conference on Learning Cities. I'm Grace Hyunjung-won, your MC for today's event. Now we are going to move on to day 3 parallel thematic session under the theme of lifelong learning for climate action. If you have any questions during the presentation, you will have time to ask questions during the Q&A session later. And for online participants, we will have your questions via chat room. And now I'd like to pass my microphone to today's moderator, Mr. Roberto Guevara. Can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, good afternoon from Melbourne. Hello.
Okay. Good afternoon, and the floor is yours now.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, welcome, and I'd like to thank the organizers, the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, the Global Learning Cities Network, and the City of Yeonsu for pushing forward to attempt to overcome the restrictions that have been caused by the pandemic for us to continue, to learn. As one of the speakers yesterday from Goyang, the mayor of Goyang, Mr. Jayon Lee, but also Professor Mike Osborne spoke, there was a lot of learning loss during the pandemic. But at the same time, they also recognized more than just learning lost in curriculum. There was a lot of learning that was also gained in terms of non-formal education that happened across all the cities that presented yesterday. So I think it's really important for us to welcome each other and acknowledge where we are coming from. I speak today from Melbourne, Australia. I speak from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. As a student, I came here in early 1990s, but I have stayed on, and I acknowledge that I have been embraced by the people. And so I'd like to acknowledge also where each of you are coming from, and if you can, and this is practice for how you will engage later on in the chat box, is to acknowledge and tell us where you're coming from today. And so while we're doing that, just some reminders. This is a very unusual multiverse hybrid, as they said. So some of you are in Zoom. I think some of you are in Yeonsu, and some of you are in the live stream. So I welcome everybody. And I think this is one of the ways for us to connect with each other, but also to acknowledge that we are grounded in the land where we are. We breathe the air where we are, but despite that, we all share the one sun. There's one sun that we all either today have shining to us, but maybe cloudy. Okay. And it is this sun, when we start to talk about global warming, that is partly the problem, but also is partly the solution in terms of renewable energy. So today, I welcome you to this discussion as part of the conference to be able to look at what we want to be able to explore in terms of lifelong learning for climate change. The objective of this session is very clear, that we begin with looking at what we are already doing. I like this because as adult educators and learners, I think it's important for us to begin to look at what we know rather than what we don't know. Appreciate what we have rather than what we don't, and build on that. And this is the important role of education that we play. And this is what I hope each of our speakers today, as I introduce them, will talk to. And hopefully later on, we can have a conversation that allows us to look at the 4 key questions that have been posed to us. First, the role of learning in ensuring a sustainable future for all of us, not just an economy, a sustainable future for all of us. Second, specifically, learning in the context of climate change. Third, what can citizens do to be able to achieve this sustainable future? And particularly fourth, how can cities successfully support citizens in being able to continue on what they have in terms of learning? And so with that, I'd like to remind each of the speakers, I will be gentle. You each have 8 minutes in your presentation. I will be polite to remind you with a little bit of, you have 1 minute left, but I will allow you to finish. And then hopefully, as at the end of each speaker, I'll pause a bit, give some remarks to allow our participants to introduce themselves in terms of the chat box again. And I acknowledge that I have an assistant, Christina, who's helping me in terms of harvesting your questions and your ideas. I think our first speaker actually is in person. And I apologize to our speakers because you're coming from different parts of the world. I might not pronounce your country, your cities correctly, but I'd like to welcome Mr. Elim Hajib Abdallah, the Vice President of Chefchaouen, Morocco, which is a city that is known for its blue washed buildings. Is Mr. Elim Hajib with us? And therefore, I welcome you, and you have your 8 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdallah. We can't hear you.
Alors, d'accord, merci. Voilà, je suis très satisfait d'être parmi vous.
I'm delighted to be here today.
Je devrais saluer Monsieur le maire et l'équipe qui a veillé
I would like
sur
to
l'organisation.
greet the mayor who has been a host for this extraordinary conference. I'm going to show you a video
Merci.
of our city of Shefchaouen.
نشتغل جميعا لتكون مدينة شفشاون مدينة صديقة للبيئة والمناخ، مدينة مستدامة، مدينة مدمجة، ولدينا برنامج عمل لتنزيل أهداف التنمية المستدامة على الصعيد المحلي.
Bon, merci. Donc, je présentais
Thank you kindly.
la ville appartenante, Shefchaouen, du réseau mondial UNESCO.
Shefchaouen is a member of the network of learning cities.
Opérationnalisation du concept de la
How
ville
to operationalize the concept of the learning city
de Shefchaouen.
at
Présentation de la ville.
Shefchaouen.
Shefchaouen, ou la perle bleue située
Shefchaouen is the blue pearl of Morocco. It's located in a remarkable setting. It was chosen for strategic reasons and for aesthetic reasons. Our Medina is rated amongst the most beautiful of all of Morocco. It was founded in 1471. We have some 50,000 inhabitants, and the city covers 11.5 square kilometers. These are 2019 statistics. We have a natural reserve, and we were listed on the World Heritage List in 2010. We are members of the UNESCO network of learning cities and joined that network 14 months ago. Our infrastructures and initiatives, our governance, our bodies, we have a participative council devoted to energy and sustainable development. The Municipal Board of Youth, we have a participatory budget. We created a gender equality committee. We make valuable use of our heritage, and we have cultural events. Now, the second theme is learning. We have an energy committee, we have a museum devoted to Mediterranean customs, we have an eco center, environmental center, we have a municipal music center, and we have a grassroots organization center. Our participatory council for energy, climate, and the environment. This committee is a pioneering experiment conducted by Chef Shawen. This project embodies the commitment to democracy, participatory democracy, and involves civil society in making decisions about the city's energy policy. This committee makes it possible to monitor sustainable initiatives, and the community is directly involved in any decision regarding sustainable development made by the city government. The Youth Participatory Council of the city of Chefchaouen was set up in May of 2018, and we have 29 youth who sit on this council. They are there to contribute their views to the way the city is run. Why 29 youth? Because the member of the municipal body number the same. So we have equality. We want to bolster these initiatives with the support of our inhabitants, and the idea is to help young people discover how a municipality is run. Between 18 and 35, any young person can run for election. The idea is to make sure that all the youth-oriented activities are represented. The council has established partnerships with players from civil society to ensure that it can make itself heard and make sure that they can make themselves heard by the municipal authority bodies, and make sure that they have their say in development programs.
1 minute, sir.
The participatory budget. This is a political process which makes it possible to allow our inhabitants to have their say in how the municipal budget is spent. And they have their say in every stage of the process, of the budget-making process. This makes it possible to ensure that there's a constructive dialogue between the local authorities and our citizens with full respect for democratic process.
So the project has a participatory budget.
Are you able to wind up, sir?
Comment?
Can somebody explain?
Oui, oui, oui. Non,
Yes. Sorry, I'm sorry. So, creation of the parity and equal opportunity committee. Now, it is an advisory body which tries to guarantee equal opportunity and gender approach for the community board. And we also have the museum of DEM with the action plan, assessment of heritage, capacity building, awareness raising, communication, and governance. So let me move fast. We also have the municipal house for music, which is a learning education space for music, working on music, and it was set up through a partnership with the town of Genève in France. We also have workshop tools, recycling containers, geothermal energy, education training space on environmental issues. These are schools for sustainable professions. We organize cultural activities, jazz, photo, poetry, cinema, and we wanted to act locally for sustainable development based on lifelong education. This is the motto of Chefchaouen commune. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdallah. And I'm sorry to have to cut you. It was interesting to see the video, but also to be able to hear your story in terms of how in Chefchaouen you started with the value of the place. There was something inherent in the beauty of the place, but it is this value of the place that therefore links to the whole notion of how do we preserve this place, taking care of the environment, taking care of the people. And I think central to what you were talking about, I heard time and time again, you talked about the partnership with young people, the partnership with the citizens, in ensuring that there is equity in opportunities. And I think as a starting point for our other speakers, I think you have set the base. You have, as I said, grounded us in place, gave us a visual of why the place is important, but also you talked about a process of where this kind of valuing of place is not just something that's romanticized, but something that is lived. And we continue to face the challenge, as you said, through a lot of the issues around facing energy, but also addressing the issue of waste. So I'd like to say thank you very much. If there are any questions in terms of the presentation of Mr. Elim Hajib, Abdallah, please, again, it's your opportunity to put them in the chat box, and Christina will call my attention to this. And so just to proceed now with our next speaker. Okay, our next speaker now comes, so we've moved from Morocco, and I'd like to acknowledge that hopefully some of you and some of us might be in Morocco next year when the Adult Learning Conference happens in Morocco. The 7th Confintia Conference happens in Morocco. But from Morocco, but actually he was in Korea, we moved to Japan. And I'd like to welcome a friend and a colleague who I have worked with for so many years in education for sustainable development. Okay, I'd like to welcome Ms. Miki Konishi, who now is with the United Nations University as the Program Coordinator for Innovation and Education in the Institute of Advanced Studies of Sustainability. Now, it serves as a secretariat of this other network, the Regional Centers of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development, or the RCEs. Okay, prior to joining UNUIAS in April 2020, Miki has worked in the private sector, academic institutions, and local government. And I know her from the time that we were working together in projects in Okayama. And so, Miki, I'd like to welcome you, and it's good to hear from you. You have your 8 minutes now. Thanks, Miki.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Could you please share your screen to share our PowerPoint? So my name is Miki Konishi. I'm the Program Coordinator of Innovation and Education Program at UNUIAS. And as Dr. Guevara kindly introduced, before I joined UNUIAS, I worked at the local government of City of Okayama, one of the members of Learning City Network. So I'm very much delighted and honored to be part of this 5th International Conference. And I also sincerely thank Yonsei City and UIL for giving me this opportunity. And next slide, please. As you can see on this slide, the presentation consists of 4 parts. And let me begin with the introduction to RCE. Next slide, please. RCE stands for Regional Centers of Expertise on ESD, and it is not a physical center, but it is an institutional mechanism to translate global sustainability goals into local actions. And as you can see on this slide, it is a multi-stakeholder network consisting of existing institutions from various sectors, including local government. And RCE functions as an innovative platform and a living laboratory to facilitate interdisciplinary and cross-sectoral dialogue and collaboration. Next slide, please. RCEs are acknowledged by United Nations University through evaluating applications submitted annually. And since 2005, the number of RCE has been continuously increasing, and currently there are 181 RCEs around the world. UNU is serving as the Global RCE Service Center and supporting the network's development. And last June, we also developed a new RCE roadmap covering 2021 to 2030. Next slide, please. Now, let me try to illustrate some commonalities and differences between learning cities and RCEs. So both RCEs function as effective mechanism to promote local actions towards sustainable development and provide lifelong and life-wide learning opportunities for all. And there are also some differences, for example, in governing body, geographical scope, and approaches. But the approaches or the entry point between Learning City and RCEs is different, but needless to say, both top-down and bottom-up approaches are essential to realize sustainable cities and communities. So I believe that 2 global networks can complement and learn from each other to create synergy. And so now let me introduce some good cases from the RCE network on climate actions. Next slide, please. From 2015 to 2019, about 480 projects were reported, and all of them, of course, covered SDG 4, quality education. And besides Goal 4, as you can see in this bar chart, 137 projects contributed to climate action SDG 13, which demonstrate the high level of interest in pressing issue and its emergency. And UNUIS published a book showcasing 12 outstanding cases tackling climate change and also produced a video. And let me introduce 3 cases featured in the publication that cover different types of education, such as formal, non-formal, and informal education. Next slide, please. The first project is conducted by RC Bogota, Colombia, in particular in informal learning settings. So it is a youth-led project targeting youth living in the urban area to promote low-carbon sustainable lifestyles. And it is characterized by young leaders mobilizing young entrepreneurs and featuring their initiatives in various in-person and virtual events organized by the university or local government in collaboration with multi-stakeholders. So we can learn the power of peer learning among youth and importance of utilizing attractive tools depending on the target groups and deliver inspirational message to motivate them to act. Next slide, please. So the second case is from RC Denmark, which is a curriculum-based and vocational training conducted in a formal education setting. And this project aims to transform construction industry through empowering future carpenters for sustainable construction and building. And various stakeholders involved in developing curriculum together, so including educational and research institutes, unions, manufacturers, and companies. So though through this certified curriculum, the apprentices or future carpenters gain knowledge and practical skills, and furthermore, they play the role of ambassadors for sustainable construction and inspire master carpenters that promote intergenerational learning and has meaningful impact to transform the value chain of the construction industry. Next slide, please. The third case is from RC Greater Atlanta, USA. This is a non-formal and more problem-solving types of education, focusing on adaptation measures against climate change in the workplace. And the target groups is agricultural workers who are most adversely affected by excessive heat and have little control over their work environment. So the project conducted research trainings and disseminated the findings to workers, employers, and the broader public by creating learning materials and video. So addressing climate change, both mitigation and adaptation measures are inevitable. Next slide, please. So in summary, I want to highlight some key points as recommendations for promoting climate actions and learning at the local level. As climate change is a complex problem, any one-size-fits-all approach may not be suited for every city or community. So therefore, measures and actions for climate mitigation and adaptation should be contextualized. Second, identification of leverage points, such target groups or key issues or key areas, and also people who may be especially vulnerable to climate change is essential for effective interventions. Third, multi-stakeholder partnership is foundation for collaboratively solving issues. So oftentimes good idea exists within the community, and it is important to acknowledge these ideas and make full use of them. And working with partners from different sectors, projects generate bigger impact. So I'm convinced that the local government is in the best position to facilitate these kind of multi-stakeholder collaboration. And last but not the least, education and lifelong learning in all formal, non-formal, and informal learning settings are very powerful means to encourage people to become change agents and to empower others beyond sectors and generations to create low carbon, climate resilient, and sustainable communities. Next slide, please. Lastly, I want to take this opportunity to announce the upcoming Global RC Conference to be held virtually from 16th to 18th of November, a few days after COP286, which will be held in Glasgow. And there will be some sessions focusing on climate actions, and conference is open to the public. So if you are interested in, please join us, and you can register from the website. Last slide, please. Next slide, please. So if you want to know more about RCE, please join our, please visit the website, and also do not hesitate to contact me, and I welcome your questions. So thank you very much for your kind attention. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Mickey. You were on time with a little adjustment and the advertisement. So if because we can't see the slide, if anybody who is working with Mickey, just put the link to the conference for the RCE conference. I see that it's there now. Thank you very much. It's nice to hear you tell the story this time, Mickey, after not having been able to see you for a long time since Okayama, in a sense that you capture some of the the things that we talked about before, but that continue to be relevant. So you highlighted the need for context. And context is about place. And place, as you said, is about, for example, a learning city, but also a network of cities like the Global Learning Cities Network, but also similar to the RCEs. And I think, as you said, the difference between the RCEs and the Learning Cities Network is the starting point. the leverage of the starting point that you recognize, for example, the value of the local government, whether it's RCE or Learning City, is really important in generating the kind of partnership you call the multi-stakeholder partnership that is essential. And I think one of the things that I invite everybody to listen to as we go on our next three speakers is what Mickey talked about, that often we think of education as focusing on the formal education system, education of young people, of children for the future. But what you talked about is you highlighted that there is a broad range of education. It's not just lifelong, it's life-wide. And that life-wide includes formal, non-formal, and informal learning. And you gave rich examples for that. And so thank you very much. And it's nice again. And hopefully at the end, we will have opportunities to deepen some of your experiences through questions. Again, as I said, I'm inviting people. I think it's Christina who can see. I cannot see the questions in the chat box, but I think there's a space where that is being harvested at the moment, and it will be shared with us later on. So thank you again, Mickey. And I'd like to go on now to our next speaker. Okay, I'd like to welcome Ms. Shanti Jagannathan. Shanti is from the Asian Development Bank as the Principal Education Specialist, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. And I'm not sure of where you are located, Shanti, but if you're in the headquarters of the ADB, are you in Manila?
No, not at the moment. Not since the lockdown. I've been in Chennai in India.
Oh, okay. So
But
you're
headed back to Manila very soon. In the
next I'm jealous because I wish to go home. Some of the things that we are being stopped from doing. So Shanti, you have your 8 minutes, and I look forward to listening to your nice to see lifelong learning for effective climate action.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And I hope we meet in Manila soon. Greetings to everyone joining this session today. And many thanks for the opportunity on behalf of Asian Development Bank. Let me begin with the reaffirmation, next slide, of the importance of education and training to fight climate change. There's been a growing international recognition of education as a key enabler for a sustainable future. In fact, the Rio conference, the Johannesburg summit, and the UN Decade of Sustainable Education for Sustainable Development, they've all contributed very significantly to developing this agenda. And Mickey's presentation just now also highlighted how much work has already gone into this sphere. So the impending COP26 is just a milestone for us to see how to amplify education training for climate commitments. Next slide. So if you look at the education and climate change nexus, you can see that, there's, on the one hand, education can be very adversely affected by, climate disasters. So the closure of schools from floods and other climate disasters can disrupt schooling in a very big way. On the other hand, climate change can also be positively affected or mitigated, where education be a great catalyst for knowledge and action to fight the climate change in terms of both adaptation and mitigation. And so we just really, we have to look to educational skills to prepare the right professional base to implement sustainability. Next slide. Here, let's look at why lifelong learning has become important in the discourse on education. I mean, educationists are now increasingly stressing lifelong learning and learning to learn as key paradigms. So what are the key drivers for this? The first is this exponential rise of technologies, which are changing, lives and marketplaces very significantly. Second is what we observe is that skills are tending to have a very limited shelf life, which means that there are no more degrees or qualifications for life. Then job markets have become increasingly unpredictable, which call for education institutions to up their game to keep up with the times. The millennials, or the digital natives, and their learning styles are also influencing how teaching and learning is a continuum well beyond the four walls of the school. or the education institutions. And last but not least, climate change is calling for a much more agile and adaptive education system. Next slide. So moving now to explore a little bit about, on the transformations in education. It cannot be disputed that over the last 2 or 3 decades, tremendous progress was achieved in increasing access to education and also inequity like girls' participation and so on. However, education quality has remained a thorny problem and continues to be a difficult issue. And there's also now pressing need to look at how to enable new departures in curriculum and pedagogy that helps with climate action. There's also need to look at going beyond access to look at how the quality and the content of education can help us to navigate the development challenges like the one that we are talking about today. And to bring and build on the track record of the decade of education for sustainable development, and to build a talent pipeline to effectively fight climate change. Next slide. Here I'd like to share that education and training for climate action can actually cut across all levels of education, starting from basic elementary basic education, which helps to strengthen foundational literacy and the way STEM disciplines are taught. In TVET, we can look to how we can prepare adequately trained and skilled workers that can facilitate faster technology absorption and also help to incorporate and to facilitate how to adapt or adopt greening strategies. The buildup of a cadre of green professionals and many of the institutions that ADB works with in training institutions, we're already looking at how to build this cadre of green professionals to provide the knowledge base necessary to blend technology, product development with finance to open up climate-friendly market solutions. And higher education institutions contribute to R&D, advances in technology, and in measuring and monitoring impact of climate change on occupations. And they help to set standards, training of trainers, certification of technical protocols that are concerned with climate change, adapting or mitigating processes. This is also something that we need to build on the good work that has already been done. Next slide. Another set of factors to consider in terms of the role of education is to look at how can we strengthen the enabling environment where curriculum design, regulations, and optimal consumer behavior patterns can be addressed. Then there is the need to really actively promote, on the one hand, we start with enabling conditions where we create the basic sort of foundational readiness, whether it's in education institutions or in other settings, to strengthen the basic conditions. The next is sort of promoting conditions where we can where sustainable approaches, such as it could be in the form of establishing eco-villages or developing concrete climate-friendly products and services, or how we can, incentivize low carbon economic growth. Lastly, like I mentioned in the previous slide, also the verifying functions, which require professionals who can perform the role of compliance, confirmation, or in terms of verifying and assuring compliance against regulations, whether it's climate related or environment related regulations such as energy audits, eco-labeling, ISO certification, and so on. So we really look to, this stage, we really look for higher order capacities and professional bases to be established and upgraded regularly as also things keep changing. Next slide. In this slide, the point is to stress that every citizen has a role to play. It's not just government and policy makers. It includes the entire society. Next slide. So in this last slide, I want to mention the role of cities, given that the overall theme of this event is centered around learning cities. So education systems can be, on the one hand, strong beneficiaries, in city development. Let us take the example of smart cities. So, in the smart city context, on the one hand, the education and training can provide the trained professionals that are needed to help spread the technological transitions required to set up smart cities. So city planning and development really needs to factor in educational services and give due prominence to strengthen the role of knowledge institutions like universities, schools, polytechnics, and also reinforce the investments that are needed to support knowledge assets such as libraries, or also other entities and institutions like adult education centers and so on. And so in a smart city context, education delivery, it needs to be much more on a modernized platform with new courses and curriculum, including climate action disciplines, and with capacities to deliver online education matched with micro-credentials that serve climate action occupations, related occupations, and green occupations. So support to skilling and reskilling for climate resilience also means that corporations and workplaces can upgrade themselves and become more climate friendly. And workplaces become climate friendly, and we also have then cities become more livable and inclusive, and the societies in general also become more climate resilient. So in the context of the growing interest in post-COVID digitalization and green recovery, here is an opportunity for climate resilient action through education and training. So I conclude with that, and I really stress the importance of education as a long-term strategy for climate change. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Shanti. Again, spot on time, really. And in terms of, again, you continue to and you continue to expand the conversation, and we've gone through halfway. I just want to try to synthesize a bit, and I'm getting worried that nobody's chatting apparently. So I'd like to find out if our participants can actually contribute in the chat to be able to ask questions, because we have generated very meaningful, interesting, and different contextual conversations, starting from, as we said, the city Chafrouin in Morocco, and then Mickey talked about the different cities that are involved in the regional centers for expertise and the focus on lifelong learning as life-wide, but also formal, non-formal, and informal. And Shanti took us further in terms of, I think what I really like, you said, education as an enabler. It's not a short-term solution. It's long-term, but our education system also needs to be agile. I think most of us would often think of, when we think of education and learning, we think of what can the learners learn, okay? But also, what can the system learn? And I think that's what you, Shanti, were saying, that we are learning at the same time, but the system also has to change, because what COVID has provided us, for example, is an opportunity to be able to see how we respond, how our education system responds to a crisis. And we cannot afford another kind of crisis where so much learning is lost, okay? Where so much learning is lost in that case. Oh, we have a question. Okay, I'm just going to ask Jürgen, and I need to know how to pronounce it. Is it Ville? Ville? Maybe if you can switch your microphone on so I can pronounce it correctly later on. Sorry? How do I pronounce your name?
Ville.
Ville.
Ville, thank you.
Okay.
Jose, that's excellent.
Thank you. So Jürgen and Ville, I will just, because we got a question, I just want to have a break between talking, and quickly we have a question from one of the winning cities from Windham. Can I ask, so there's a question here, and in terms of, maybe I'll just go first to either Shanti, Mickey, or even our speaker from Morocco. How can local governments move beyond tokenism in reporting on the SDGs? It's a very big question. Maybe Shanti, do you have a because you work with local governments, and then I'll go to Mickey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think especially when we think about large countries in the region that I work in, this kind of localization is just so important. Let me take my own country as an example, and Indonesia, Bangladesh. In fact, in Indonesia, ADB is supporting an initiative to localize SDGs, where each of the local government units will be tracking the progress on SDGs. And at the national level, there's also a monitoring mechanism where there is a large gap, based on the national average, how to support those local government entities to come up to speed and to address some of the thorny issues where they may be lagging behind. And I think that, localizing the sort of, the achievement of SDGs also makes for a faster progress towards equity across the country.
Yeah, so I guess part of that, as you're arguing, is tokenism happens when you don't have the ownership. As you said, localization helps to bridge that ownership, that this is ours,
Indeed.
and therefore I will report the reality of it.
Also, incentivizing, what we are trying to do in our program in Indonesia is to allocate finances based on the performance. So performance-based allocation of resources against SDGs. So that's a powerful incentivizer.
Okay. And so, Mickey, any experience on local government and how to make sure that it's genuine reporting, that we really hear the story, not just beautiful numbers? Mickey.
From my own experience working at a local government, I think SDG is a very complex challenge, and also for the local government, it is a challenging thing. But to communicate about SDGs will help to communicate among different stakeholders, and that is kind of intensivizer, or motivate them to think about that. And maybe I agree, sometimes the reporting just writes something beautiful, but the try to write something beautiful will bring us also think about visionally. I mean, what can be done and what could be done. So I think communicate about SDG is a good thing to facilitate such kind of collaboration and the entry point for make the transformation real.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Mr. Abdallah available? If not, I'm going to continue and he can join us towards the end. Okay, because I can't see him on the screen. This is the difficulty. Okay, so maybe we'll get Mr. Abdallah's experience after. And so I'd like to continue now to make sure that we're just picking up the momentum. I'm sorry I had to break it because it was just, and now I know that the participants are responding to us. And so I'd like to welcome Jürgen. Jürgen, again, Jürgen Forkel-Schubert from Hamburg. And I'd like to welcome, Jürgen is an ESD expert, a consultant and former head of the ESD department of the Hamburg Ministry for Environment, Climate, Energy and Agriculture for the Free and Hanseatic city of Hamburg. And I've spent a month in Hamburg with the UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning 5 years ago. And so therefore, I think, Jürgen, sorry, Mr. Abdallah, can you hold on and we'll bring you back later. Now I'm trying to juggle what's on screen and so thank you. So I'll just go with Jürgen for the moment. Thank you. And Mr. Abdallah, you can think about the question and somebody can translate also to you. So thank you, Jürgen, all the way from Hamburg.
Yes, hello everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes,
wonderful.
We can hear you.
I can see the presentation already. Thanks very much. Thank you so much for the invitation and for all supporting work done by UL colleagues. It's a great honor for me to present the activities of Hamburg. Hamburg has been a member of the Global Network of Learning Cities since 2019 and is right now co-chairing the ESD cluster together with Espoo and Shanghai. Hamburg has around 1.8 million inhabitants and is the second biggest city in Germany. It is a very blue and green city because of its many rivers and parks. But to put it correctly, Hamburg is not yet a climate smart city, but it wants to become one. Next, please. Hamburg is a port city and therefore especially vulnerable to climate change. Since 1881, the temperature in Hamburg has risen by more than 3 degrees. In the past, there have been multiple floods, storm damages, and heavy rain events in the old town. The population is very aware of the negative effects of climate change. It is therefore not surprising that many, especially young people, take part on Friday for Future demonstrations in Hamburg. Hamburg supports this, regardless of the different opinions on how to deal with climate change. Next, please. Hamburg has a broad network of scientific institutions on the subject of climate. We call it the Climate Campus. Different institutions work together on a scientific basis. They do research, political and economic advice, and also offer a lot of information to schools. Next, please. Hamburg is not only a city, but also a federal state in Germany with its own constitution. Our city government, called the Hamburg Senate, has therefore been supporting and promoting activities for climate adaptation and mitigation since many years. The climate protection plan exists since 2015 and is regularly updated and supplemented by strategies and scientific reports. In February last year, we officially included a new goal in our constitution, namely that global warming must be limited and carbon dioxide emissions must be reduced. The city must be climate neutral by 2050 at latest. Next, please. For us, good climate policy also includes education and lifelong learning approaches. It was only in June this year that the Senate approved the Hamburg ESD Master Plan. This is a systematic approach that encompasses all areas of education, from kindergarten to schools, vocational training, universities, further education, and extracurricular educational institutions. This master plan contains goals for the period up to 2030 on how the topic of sustainability can be more closely integrated into all fields of education. 6 working groups have worked on it for more than 2 years and put together over 100 measures. The Senate agreed on it and provided funds totaling 1.1 million euros for this purpose. A steering group was set up in which experts from administration and non-governmental organizations work together on equal footing. And a university is commissioned with a scientific evaluation. Next, please. Hamburg will provide a total of 4 billion euros for the construction of new schools and renovation of existing schools by 2030. There are already some so-called zero energy schools in Hamburg. In future, solar systems will be installed on all school roofs. The number of parking spaces will be reduced and the green areas will be prepared for infiltration of rainwater. And now, as a special example, I would like to introduce the Hamburg Climate Schools, because these schools have committed to work out a holistic approach to develop their own climate action plans. Next, please. Our schools need more space and freedom for projects. Here you can see some good examples like experimenting with renewable technologies or questioning our unsustainable consumption. Students learn in so-called repair cafes how to repair their broken things. Another project is to cycle to school on your own and not have your parents drop you off in the car. This is why this is not only young people learn, but people of ages. Next, please. And this is what a systematic approach in climate schools look like. Everyone in the school is involved. Students, teachers, the principal, parents, nursing staff, and caretakers. The city provides climate trainers for schools. The plan is decided jointly by everyone. It lists what has to be done, by when, who does it, who is responsible, and how much carbon dioxide is saved. Next, please. I firmly believe that climate change makes all problems worse. It affects the economy, health, infrastructure, and peaceful coexistence. This is why I see lifelong learning is key education and a contribution to securing peace. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. You've saved us a lot of time. Very efficient, Jürgen. Thank you. But I think one of the key things that you mentioned that I like what you called the climate campus, when the climate campus is actually the city as the campus. In other words, as you said, it's not just about the school, but the school reaching out to the community. There are certain projects. You talk about it being holistic and systemic in approach. And so you cover energy, transport, biodiversity, consumption, and even this little thing about repairing things is so important. And so I think part of that, and again, the other refrain that we have heard from all is the value of partnership. Okay, this is something that continues to be there. Okay, and I think in our next presentation, so I'd like to invite Dr. Ville Tajama from ESPO. Is that how you say in Finland? Again, in terms of, I think interesting. He answered, I think, Jacques' question earlier in terms of the role that voluntary national reviews, which I think your voluntary local reviews is something that's really important as it relates to the SDG. So I think I invite you to include that maybe in your presentation. But Ville is the editor-in-chief of the ESPO VLR 2020, the voluntary local review, and in charge of the 5-year project SDG 2025 that will integrate Agenda 2030 and the SDGs in the strategy of the city and its implementation. So I'd like to invite you, Ville, and you have your 8 minutes.
Thank you so much. A warm hello to all of you, to all time zones. Excellent presentation so far. If I'd like to map these presentations that have, I think, given us a very nice holistic picture about whether it's international or then partly regional, and now I think Jürgen gave excellent viewpoints and examples on the learning and school sides from a given city. I think very impressive indeed. I hope to contribute now perhaps from a local government perspective, but perhaps more on the cross-department view from the mayor's office that we have, working with all the different departments and units. Perhaps, hopefully, that would contribute to the voluntary local review or localizing SDGs. I think that's a hugely important and interesting topic. The only things that I would love to add to the discussion is that 2 points. First, I think it has to be strategic. So the localizing of SDGs have to strongly resonate with the local strategy so that it supports the objectives that you already have, whether it's fighting against climate change or biodiversity loss, or let's say social segregation issues or other. And the other point is, has to be participatory. I think it was Shanti who excellently pointed out that in the localizing process, it's very important. Or Miki, I think both of you discussed this, that the communication part is very important to commit people. I think addition to that, to participate, to do it in a participatory process. But forward we go. Time is of lack of resources here. So next, please. Just a few points for those interested. We are in Northern Espoo, is in Northern Europe. We are the second largest city in Finland. It's a growing city, and let's say the credo or ethos of Espoo is to focus to sustainable development. That is what we want to be known from. That is what the mayor emphasizes when he creates strategies together with us, and that was what we are trying to do and doing all the time. Next, please. Few pragmatic examples as well. And isn't it difficult actually to talk about concrete examples from an abstract point of view? So this, for example, it's a participatory design concept. I think very close to similars that we have seen today. But I want you to picture in your mind an excavator close to a schoolyard working, and that all the school children are very keenly observing the excavator and its work. And I hope you can visualize that. And what I want to say next is that excavator is implementing the design of the students. So it's the students who have designed what will happen to their schoolyard, and that's why they are really excited to see that happening. And my point here is, of course, that in addition to this concept, I want to emphasize the importance of the work that is you have to do to make this happen in a city. So the actual concrete action and concept is a tip of the iceberg, if you will, and there's a lot of work that has to be done within and outside different departments and units and different stakeholders. And this work is I would say that it's rewarding and challenging at the same time. So just that a lot of work is needed. Next, please. Another one really popular in Espoo is the urban gardening project and concept. This one actually only has 2 units that need to communicate in this case, so it's a bit easier, but still there is cross-department collaboration. Actually now, these urban gardening boxes have arrived to different parts than only schools in Espoo, and hopefully across the world soon. It's a very nice concept of gardening where you can, for instance, a senior citizen can come to a school and share his or her experience on, let's say, potato farming, and then school children can use these urban gardening boxes to grow potatoes, and we are actually doing that work ourselves as well. Next, please. Two more pragmatic issues. One, I don't know if you know this Pokemon game. I think our distinguished moderator mentioned this already. We have now launched very close to similar than Pokemon. Well, not as exciting or cool perhaps, but we hope that it catches some air. Kind of sustainability game that has the same philosophy that the Pokemon. You adventure in the city and do tasks that will add your understanding and that way raise awareness. Next, please. And finally, before going in the kind of final words, I will try to make a synthesis of, let's say, an abstract level, what is required in the lifelong learning from the kind of the mayor's office perspective. Before that, in Finland, we have this national commitment tool. It's very popular. It was launched 2016 by the Prime Minister's office, where a school or single citizen or a city can create tangible projects and commitments. And then you add them to a very large data pool, national level, and then actually we report those in the voluntary national review forward. And this has really catched fire. It's very popular. Next, please. So hopefully some of these pragmatic examples have shown us that the kind of the design challenge or the key question behind this work is that how do we inspire and enable and empower our citizens to first find their dreams and then fulfill them. I think climate change, for example, is of paramount importance. I have nothing to add to what Jürgen said. I think he simply casted in this very well, and it's one of those issues. There's other ones as well, and I just, for example, biodiversity loss, social segregation, recovering from the pandemic. These are all huge issues, and there is more to come. So how do we prepare for the future? Next, please. And no need to look at the slide. The only point here is that we need to commit all stakeholders. So when we look at local government, a city, we have experts that work on their expertise. Let's say teachers. We want our teachers to be experts. They need cross-departmental support and kind of like that is above that experience work. So, and in addition, we need to commit the citizens to work with these NGOs, national level, etc., international levels. This is, I think, why we are here today, to learn from each other, to create further networks and further this issue of learning cities. Next, please. So kind of the synthesis part is that so how do we use the agenda, how do we localize it to enhance and catalyze lifelong learning and, let's say, active learning as a way to build capacity, capacity for resilience, capacity for answering those challenges of the future. And just a few points, I think these boil down to how do we raise critical thinking, active participation and ownership, and also ability to communicate in and between cultures and different demographic issues, to have awareness that's local, national, and global. Next, please. I want to actually, as the last word, I also want to congratulate the UNESCO Lifelong Learning Cities winners and claim that new challenges will arise and we will be there to meet them through active and lifelong learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I've just been told we have to finish in 2 minutes, but I'd like to ask Mr. Abdallah to be able to, and if I have a chance, I'd like to ask you for one word in terms of what are takeaways from today. And so if Mr. Abdallah can join us, I think it might take time in terms of, I'd like, I'll go to each of the speakers after Mr. Abdallah. If one takeaway in terms of the 4 questions, the role of learning in the era of climate change, citizens and learning cities. What is one word? And Mr. Abdallah, the question on local governments and SDGs. How does your city actually address the challenge? And briefly, please, because they're going to cut me off soon. Thank you, Mr. Abdallah.
D'accord, merci.
Thank you. Let me take an example. The pandemics. With the pandemic, the pandemic will not disappear. It won't go away. It will stay with us. So we need to cope, to deal with it. And learning is a way to tackle the pandemics. Building on the youth, learning in the area of health. It is difficult for us, but this is also at the same time an experience for the youth. To summarize, learning is actually the solution upon which we can build our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the word is learning. Jürgen has a question there, but I'm going to go through the speakers the other way around. One word or one central thing, and we'll start with Ville. What is your takeaway?
Together. That's one word. Together.
Learning together. Jürgen.
My word is ambiguity.
Ambiguity. Learning together to deal with ambiguity. Santi?
Yep.
Mine is innovation. Going beyond the present. Innovation.
Innovation. So learning together to address ambiguity through innovation. Mickey.
Facilitation and coordination. So each one of us should be a coordinator for facilitate multi-stakeholder learning and actions.
Okay. And so with that, so learning together to address ambiguity in terms of coordinating, in terms of innovation. And I'd like to leave you with one word of what I call hope. When we talk of hope, and this is part of the project of ESD that we had, hope is about education being holistic, as all of our presenters said. Ville said hope is about ownership. Everybody talked about participation and partnership, but also it's about empowerment. And so we need to be, yes, we don't need to despair. We need to have hope, but the hope is deep. It's deep because it's an understanding of holism. It's an understanding that we can do things if we feel we own the problems, but we need to do it together in participation, in partnership. And that's how we feel empowered. Okay, as Jürgen says, yes, we need to be happy about learning. Learning needs to be happy. Like Ville said, you gamify, you make it exciting. And so as I started and said, yes, we all are grounded in our own place. We all have the same sun. Hopefully sometime tonight, all of you will look at not the sun because you don't want your eyes to look at the moon, perhaps. The moon is a reflection of the light from the sun, but also it's something that we can all share, that we all have this vision. We all have this vision that we want a world where climate change brings positive change. As they say, it's an issue of justice. You talk about the vulnerable and the marginalized. So we need to be able to tackle this with gusto, with strength, but informed change. That we are not just changing the climate, we are also changing the very way we learn about our environment. And it's the only way for us to be able not just to survive, but the aim is to thrive. And so I'd like to thank Mickey, Shanti, Jürgen, Ville, and Mr. Abdallah for being being very kind to me, making it easy, despite the fact that we're juggling all of this. It's been difficult. I'd like to thank Christina, and again, the people in the background. You know, there's so many people that allow us to explore this alternative kind of learning. And so from me here in Melbourne, I'd like to say in Filipino, maraming salamat. I might meet you, Shanti, in Manila. I'll call on you in the ADB. And hopefully it's nice to see you again, Mickey. And Jürgen and Ville, I think this is just the start. And Mr. Abdallah, I hope to see you when I go to Morocco for the lifelong learning, the adult learning conference in 2022. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. And stay strong, stay committed. We will be able to address the issue one at a time. But what we learn from COVID will be important for us to be able also to address the issue of climate change. Thank you very much. Maybe we can have a picture of the panel. Is that possible? I don't know who's in control. And I'd like to thank all the participants. I can see your names. It's so hard. We cannot really communicate with each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, speakers and the moderators, for a great session. In this session, we discussed the theme of lifelong learning for climate action. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have a short break for 10 minutes again, and we will begin the last parallel session at 6 p.m. in Korean time. Your participation and interest are required. Thank you.
Thank you very much.